Violence in Iraq's city of Kirkuk. Rival demonstrations between Kurdish, Arab and Turkmen communities have led to deaths and injuries. That's after plans by Iraqi security forces to return a building to Kurds which they previously held infuriated other ethnic groups. So how can the unrest be resolved? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Folly Thibault. A week of simmering tension erupted into violence in Kirkuk, Iraq. That's after reports Kurds were to be given back a building that had become the Iraqi security forces' provincial headquarters. Intended by the Iraqi government in Baghdad as a gesture of goodwill to Kurds, it led instead to a furious reaction from Arabs and Turkmen who are in the minority in the city. Some say it underlines the fragile peace in the area and the volatility of politics in the multi-ethnic province. We'll be talking with our guests in just a moment, but first, Mahmoud Abdelwahad has this report from Kirkuk.
Life is getting back to normal in the Iraqi city of Kirkuk following Saturday's violence that left 4 dead and several others injured. Now, a funeral has been held for the victims in Kirkuk, and the curfew that was imposed on Saturday night has been lifted. The highway linking Kirkuk to the northern city of Erbil that was blocked by the angry protesters has been reopened. But now security forces have been deployed in the area to impose control over the city and to prevent any more confrontation between the rival protests. Now, on Saturday, when the instructions came from Baghdad to hand over the operations headquarters in the city to the Kurdistan Democratic Party, Arabs and Turkmen residents in Kirkuk took to the streets protesting against the decision, saying that this is part of a deal to give more power to the Kurds and the Kurdistan Democratic Party in the city on the expense of their interests in the city. On the other hand, a counter-protest was staged by Kurds in the city, supporting the Kurdistan Democratic Party's return to the city and also denouncing and rejecting the closure of the highway linking Kirkuk to Erbil. Now, despite the fact that Shia Sudani, the Prime Minister of Baghdad's government, has sent instructions to postpone the handover of the operations headquarters to the Kurdistan Democratic Party, but the angry protesters here, especially Arabs and Turkmen residents in Kirkuk, say that this does not guarantee an end of the crisis because this is the core of the problem, which is handing over the headquarters to the Kurdistan Democratic Party, and postponing a problem, as they say, does not solve it. Mahmoud Abdelwahid for Inside Story, Kirkuk.
Well, Kirkuk province has Iraq's oldest oil fields and lies about 265 kilometers north of the capital, Baghdad. It's semi-autonomous with a majority Kurdish population, and it's the most ethnically diverse province in Iraq with Kurdish, Arab, Turkmen and Assyrian communities. But it's been at the center of a power struggle for decades between central governments in Baghdad and regional Kurdish parties. Between 1979 and 2003, then-President Saddam Hussein pursued a so-called policy of Arabization, where as many as 100,000 Kurds were pushed out. Years later, in 2014, Kurdish forces took control of Kirkuk that was under a joint administration with the Iraqi government. In 2017, Baghdad's forces took it back when a controversial Kurdish independence referendum was held. The Iraqi Turkmen Front and Arabic coalition, headed by the governor of Kirkuk, have since publicly opposed the return of the Kurdistan Democratic Party to the oil-rich province. Well, let's meet our guests for today's show. In Baghdad is Ahmed Rushdi, president of the House of Iraqi Expertise Foundation and the Iraqi Parliament's Secretary General Foreign Policy Advisor. In Erbil is Julian Bechocha, journalist and reporter for Rudaw, a leading media network in Kurdistan, Iraq. And in Doha is Zeidon Alkinani, non-resident fellow at the Arab Center, Washington, D.C. A warm welcome to you all, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us on Inside Story. Julian Bechocha in Erbil, let me start with you. What's really behind this tension and the violence between the Kurdish and Arab communities in Kirkuk? Is it just about the handover of the former headquarters of the Kurdish Democratic Party?
Hello, thank you for having me. The violence in Kirkuk goes back a long way. It goes back decades, because Kirkuk is a city with a very fragile social fabric. It is home to Kurds, Turkmens, and Assyrians. The recent violence mostly goes back to a decision within the last month of the Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia Sudani to hand over the headquarters of Iraq's joint operations to the Kurdistan Democratic Party so that they can return and resume political activities in Kirkuk. However, the decision has been met with fierce resistance from the Arab and Turkmen components of the city, who reject the KDP's return to Kirkuk and say that any potential return must be dealt with through the judiciary and must be done after the Iraqi provincial elections on the 18th of December. Violence, not necessarily violence, but tensions in the city have really escalated since October 16th of 2017, when the Kurdistan region of Iraq held an independence referendum, which included the city of Kirkuk, which was back then under Kurdish control. Afterwards, a group of Iraqi and popular mobilization forces pushed out the Kurdish Peshmerga and pushed out the Kurds from the city, which led to an escalation of, I guess you could say, anti-Kurdish sentiment in the city.
OK, let's bring in Ahmed Rushdi in Baghdad. Ahmed, your thoughts about the situation and why are Arab and Turkmen residents of Kirkuk so opposed to the return of the Kurdistan Democratic Party?
Well, first of all, I think you need to know two main updates. Number one is that the Federal Supreme Court today, before 3 hours, announced a state order that prevents the Iraqi government from giving this headquarters, this joint operation headquarters, to the KDP. This is the first update. The second update is that Sudani, the prime minister, called Halbusi, the speaker, and also the head of the PUK to try to manage things in a way inside the parliament, to try to make some sort of a solution inside the parliament, which means that the political process, the blocks that should go forward to defuse the crisis. So those two updates, it's very important, I think, in my opinion. Okay. The answer for your question is that the Arab and the Turkmen, it shows that we have provincial elections, and all those grassroots for the Arab and Turkmen needs to have some sort of a case, or let's say some sort of a motive to go to the elections. So in a way or another, preventing KDP from going inside Kirkuk again, I think it will be marvelous for those parties who are Arab and Turkmen and go for making some sort of a joining opinion, public opinion about going against the KDP. At the same time, it's also a very good motive for KDP and also for the Kurdish population inside Kirkuk to be united. And we all know that PUK has more powerful grassroots than KDP inside Kirkuk. But it shows that the population, the Kurdish population in Kirkuk, also being some sort of smelling a dangerous thing, is that if the Arab and the Turkmen united, that means they're going to get 50+1 from the seats of the provincial council elections, which should supposed to be happening in December. So on that way, it's not the one who actually make the first spark. I think he meant to have those chain reactions to be happened.
So there are political factors here, then, is what you're saying, in the lead up to the upcoming elections. Let me bring in Zeidon Alkinani in Doha now. Some have suggested, Zeidon, that this is also perhaps likely part of a wider campaign of harassment and targeting of the Kurdish in Kirkuk. What's your reading of the situation and the reasons behind it? Do you agree with Ahmed that there are mostly political reasons behind the unrest?
Well, of course, it is a natural outcome to feel or observe that there is a hostile or a targeted intentional hostility towards one sector, one component, or a priority over one component over another in the case of post-2003 Iraq. Kirkuk is a very good example of why it would end up being fallen under the trap of being called or trapped into an ethnic or sectarian conflict. And that is due to the fact that the identity polarizing political system in post-2003 Iraq welcomes or enhances the idea that political parties should absorb and react to the political system in a way that is based on ethnicities and sects. That is why whenever there is a Kurdish political party such as KDP or even PUK that takes over the administration, even in agreement with the federal government in Kirkuk, then Kirkuk will be considered as being hostile to the other components in the society, such as Turkmen and Arabs, and vice versa. Just as your guest rightfully mentioned that there was perhaps an anti-Kurdish sentiment in 2017 upon the time when the federal government retook Kirkuk from the control of KRG, there was also anti-Arab and anti-Turkmen sentiment. Therefore, the issue here in Kirkuk can be a part of an overarching issue in Iraq, and that is due to the fact that there is a structural issue in Iraq in terms of the identity polarizing system that we previously mentioned, and the fact that there is only one autonomous region that is following a federal autonomous perspective and leaving empty clauses in the constitution that is not clarified for the rest of the country.
Right. All right. Let me come back to you, Julian. And Ahmed Rushdi mentioned that the reasons are political, mostly because of the upcoming provincial elections. But the Arab coalition in Kirkuk has also said that returning this building to the KDP could put the province at risk, a security risk once again, which they say has improved since Iraqi security forces took over. So they're worried that security could worsen if the KDP was to return. What is the current situation as far as security is concerned? And is that concern justified by the Arab coalition?
Absolutely. So right now, as Kirkuk is under the control of the Iraqi federal government, and previously, when it was under the control of the Kurdistan regional government, both sides have claimed that they have enhanced the security of Kirkuk. So back when Kirkuk was under KRG control, the government in Kirkuk basically said that because the KRG is here now, because the Kurdish Peshmerga are the ones who are enforcing security, there's been a decline in terrorist activities and there has been an overall increase in security. However, after it was taken by Iraqi forces as well have claimed that there has been an increase in security and a decline in terrorist activities and an overall decline in crime. So both sides really construct a narrative that plays into their own benefits. The headquarters of the Joint Operations Command sits on the Erbil-Kirkuk road, and that is where the focal point of the protests was. Before 2017, when KDP withdrew from Kirkuk, they said that we will not return to Kirkuk, even though all the other Kurdish political parties still exist there. They say the KDP said that we will not return because the city is occupied by Shiite militias affiliated with Iran. But the headquarters of the Joint Operations Command used to be actually the headquarters of the KDP Leadership Council. Right. In terms of the security situation in Kirkuk, as previously mentioned, both sides claim that their side protects the security the most.
Right. Ahmed Rushdi, your thoughts on this, and also about some of the grievances of the Kurds. They say that the Arab governor appointed by Baghdad has been serving the Arab population, the Arab community, more in Kirkuk and neglecting them.
Well, all those claims actually in the hands of the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister made some sort of surveys about all the governors of all Iraqi provinces, one of them the province, the Kirkuk province, and it showed that the Arab governor there has some sort of a success in making some sort of providing services for the people there. But at the same time, there are some concerns. But not for the Kurds, apparently, according to the Kurds. According to the Kurds, it's not about infrastructure projects, it's more about security. And what's happened with the joint operation headquarters, it's supposed to be hand over to the KDP according to a deal happened between the Kurdistan delegation that made a deal with the Prime Minister Sudani before about 3 months. And that's why the budget actually have been voted peacefully and smoothly, because there was a deal between the two parts about one of the items of the deal is that handing over this headquarter, this joint venture, joint operation headquarter. But the most important thing, it looks like that the Arab and the Turkmen in Kirkuk, it looks like someone behind them pushed them to try to stop KDP from taking this headquarter, which is in the road between Kirkuk and Erbil, and at the same time, push the Supreme Court, the Federal Supreme Court, to announce such a state order to prevent the Prime Minister from giving this headquarter to the KDP.
Who is that someone you're talking about, Ahmed? Are they external forces, external factors also at play here?
Well, it looks like the blocs, the political blocs that anti-Kurdish went to the Prime Minister, tried to convince him, is that it's not right to make all the deal or to complete all the deal with the KDP or with the Kurdish side, that it's supposed to be signed over before 3 months before the voting for the budget. So it looks like, I don't know for sure, that those blocs inside the parliament pushed hard to get a state order from the Federal Supreme Court to prevent Sudani from doing anything in Kirkuk. So that's why Sudani now calling Halbusi, calling Bafel, the head of PUK, tried to manage things in a way to convince the blocs, to convince the political blocs to try to defuse the crisis with the KDP.
Let me put that same question to Zeidon Alkinani. Zeidon, the Prime Minister al-Sudani, when he took power last year, did say that he wanted to improve relations between his government and the KDP, and agreed to allow the KDP to reopen its headquarters in Kirkuk. Who's preventing him from improving relations? And again, are there external factors? Because some have pointed the finger at Iran. Is that a concern? Is that justified?
Well, yeah, one alliance to look at that wouldn't be in support or in favor of allowing KDP to expand its influence in Kirkuk or in other areas would be the alliance that put Prime Minister Sudani in power from the first place and allowed the governmental formation to take place under his reign. And that is the alliance between the coordination framework, which includes political parties that have their armed groups within the Popular Mobilization Forces, which entered Kirkuk in 2017, alongside their Kurdish ally, the PUK, which is accused by their Kurdish rival KDP of giving away or giving up Kirkuk to the federal Iraqi government and the Popular Mobilization Forces at the time. So that is definitely one side of the argument, or one side of that is easy to be pointed at when considering who is pushing or convincing the Prime Minister to not allow KDP to retake full control of Kirkuk.
So, Zeidon, how do you see this affecting the talks between the central government in Baghdad and the Kurds to settle the issues that remain unsettled between the two sides?
It will significantly affect it. The Erbil-Baghdad relations is not only limited by the oil or the economic aspects, which includes the budget and the salaries here. It's also heavily impacted by the geopolitical factor. Kirkuk can be said to be the most important topic to be looked at when analyzing or assessing the Erbil-Baghdad relations. In fact, falling into the trap of an intra-Kurdish political competition has also affected Baghdad in previous months or years during the delays of the governmental formation. We noticed that in the delays of having the PUK and KDP, the two Kurdish rivals, and not agreeing in naming or appointing the Kurdish share and the Iraqi federal governmental political system, and that was the presidency at the time. This might be dragging back the Erbil-Baghdad relations back, or putting the ball back into the court of the intra-Kurdish political rivalry. Intra-group political competition, in fact, has been an interesting factor to look at when assessing post-2003 Iraqi political stability, rather than it being intergroup rivalries, which is why Kirkuk should be overlooked not just as an ethnic or a sectarian issue, but it can also be looked as a political issue through the internal group competitions.
A wider political issue. And I do want to ask you about this, Julian. Zeidon mentioned the intra-Kurdish political competition. To what extent has that undermined the power and the influence of the Kurdish regional authority, and how do you see this current matter in Kirkuk being resolved? Can the Kurds, the Arabs and the Turkmen coexist peacefully in the province?
Yes. So obviously with a united Kurdish voice, so that means that the Kurdistan Democratic Party and the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan being on the same page, they stand to have a very strong chance in, for example, performing great at the Iraqi provincial elections in Kirkuk. But unfortunately, the reality now that we have seen over the past months is that the relations between the KDP and PUK have deteriorated, with some even saying that they have deteriorated to an all-time low. This really jeopardizes against any potential gains that the Kurdistan regional government could make in Kirkuk, especially with regard to the Iraqi provincial elections. The whole idea of the KDP returning to Kirkuk right now within this time period was so they could contest the Iraqi provincial elections. That is a dangerous thing for the Arab and the Turkmen component of the city, and they would do their best to prevent that from happening, because a KDP return could potentially mean that they will end up winning seats in the local councils of the city, which could eventually result in them replacing acting Governor Rakan al-Jaburi, who has been accused of reversing Arabization policies, of basically promoting Arabization policies, and has been accused of neglecting Kurdish neighborhoods in Kirkuk more in favor of the Arab ones, despite all the progress that he has made, as shown by a survey by the Iraqi government. But the whole idea is that right now the KDP and the PUK are unfortunately on bad terms, and this does not signify something good for the KRG when it comes to dealing with the whole Kirkuk situation. And also this could really jeopardize relations between the KRG and the Iraqi federal government, because as per agreement made months ago, the headquarters of the Joint Operations Command and two other offices in Kirkuk had to be returned to the KDP. So the recent federal Supreme Court decision suspending that may basically force a KDP delegation to go to Baghdad and be like, and just indicate that this is not what they agreed on.
Let me ask Ahmed Rushdi for his thoughts about this. Ahmed, can the Kurds, the Arabs and the Turkmen coexist peacefully in Kirkuk, or are you concerned that the situation could get out of control in the lead up to the provincial elections?
I don't think so. In a way or another, this crisis shows that how much important the ethnicity in Kirkuk and how much important the alliance between the Kurds and between the Arab and the Turkmen against the Kurds. And it looks like the next election, the provincial elections, will pave the way for new future to Kirkuk. More Arab Turkmen Kirkuk than Kurdish Kirkuk. And it looks like that because the vision, or let's say at least the surveys and the statistical analysis shows that the Arab and the Turkmen, if they will still united, will go forward for provincial elections, will get 50+1 seats. That means the governor will be Arabic definitely. So it shows you that all those managing things, all those procedures, on the other side, the Kurdish side, precisely the KDP are very curious to manage those things. But the problem is that the Kurdish lists are divided in Kirkuk. They are not united on one flag, on one issue. Just what's happened is that the KDP has its own list, PUK has its own lists in Kirkuk. So it shows you that all those crises will be managed or will be rolling just on an ice ball to reach to the day of elections in Kirkuk.
Okay, your thoughts about this, Zeidon. Do you see the situation getting out of control in the lead up to the provincial elections, or do you think, as Ahmed, that the crisis can be managed?
The crisis can be managed if the political parties or the political class, including the ones in government, do respect that democracy is based on votes and not on predetermined positions, particularly when these positions are identity polarized from political parties that have been significantly known for not being popular in the Iraqi streets across the spectrum. However, if political agreements on predetermining political positions in different provinces, including Kirkuk, will continue to take place without acknowledging the fact that there are elections to determine who will be governing this province, then the issue will escalate further.
Okay, I'll give you the last word, Julian. What needs to happen for the situation to remain calm, for the communities there to coexist peacefully in the lead up to these elections? And as I asked Ahmed and Zeidon, do you think that this can be managed by the central government in Baghdad?
Yes. So the reality is that in a multi-ethnic Kirkuk, where the social fabric is so easily jeopardized, the Iraqi government truly needs to sit down with the components inside Kirkuk to come up with solutions, come up with proposals before actually enforcing them. This was a mistake that we saw for Prime Minister Mohammed Shia Sudani make when he decided to hand over the Joint Operations Headquarters without consulting the people of Kirkuk. Yesterday, Arshad Salehi, the head of the Iraqi Turkmen Front, which is the largest Turkmen bloc in the Iraqi parliament, in a press conference said that any decision regarding Kirkuk has to be done through dialogue with Kirkuk's components. So the only real way for the situation in Kirkuk to be slightly managed heading up to the Iraqi provincial elections is for a dialogue table to be formed with representatives of all communities to come up to a solution so that peace can exist in the city and that elections can be conducted thoroughly and without violence.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for shedding light on what is a very complicated issue in Iraq. Thank you, Ahmed Rushdi, Julian Bechocha, and Zeidon Alkinani. And thank you as well for watching. You can always watch this program again anytime by visiting our website at aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And of course, you can join the conversation on X, formerly known as Twitter. Our handle is at AJ Inside Story. From me, Folly, Thibault, and the whole team here in Doha, thanks for watching. Bye for now.